Our speakers, Russell, your floor. So the key here is that just like you would configure an email, we're going to talk about a couple of All right, test. That's better. All right. Sorry about that. Hi, Jake here. So this is going to be a pretty quick question or session. So a lot of time for question and answer. I might tell a joke or two just to wake everybody up. But we'll focus on the demo. So Russ here is going to give you a demo not only of how to set it up, but how to use it, and we'll actually showcase not only what's coming in, but the art of the possible. So we'll showcase a little bit of Integration Hub, which has out-of-the-box Slack connections, Slack and Teams, and others, to do more of a collaborative conversation with channel members. And then open it up for questions. So again, Jake Berman, been doing enterprise management for 20 years, been with Servicenow for about 4, but new to product management. So took this role on about 2 months ago. So everything you like about the product, glad to hear that feedback. Everything you don't like, it's the other guy. Russ, will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Russell Chaddock. I'm from the notifications team, and I've been working on all things having to do with email, push notifications, now Slack and Teams.
All right, so we're going to go over 3 things: what exists in London, a couple use cases, and then, again, live demo. So first, Slack and Teams integration, just like I mentioned. Through standard ServiceNow configuration, if you're a ServiceNow admin, everybody here use email? So who's a ServiceNow admin in the room? All right, a few of you, most of you, that's great. So idea is to not introduce you into some new setup, some new thing. Use the native capabilities that are out there in ServiceNow for how to, trigger based on a condition. Condition was met on a record. I want to send out a notification. Now I can pick my channel: Slack, Teams, push, or email. And there's 2 types of notifications. There's a standard push notification, and then there's the idea of buttons. These buttons could be something like approval, a survey response, question and answer, that sort of thing. Integration Hub is a component of Flow Designer. So if you're familiar with orchestration or legacy workflow and orchestration, orchestration is when you integrate out third-party systems. So Integration Hub is like that, but in a new modern codeless or low-code experience. And so we have out-of-the-box actions for Slack and Teams. The one thing to note about this is this Integration Hub is there is a fee, so it's an orchestration cost. But the Slack and Teams options are unlimited. So once you have the orchestration license, you can leverage the Slack and Teams integration with platform notifications and create hooks to do more actions, more activities. And we'll showcase some of that today. So again, this will be very brief on the slides. Couple quick scenarios. It's an alternative channel. Users that are doing work can get engaged with their preferred channel, their preferred method. So instead of getting that push notification, getting that email, if they are always working in Slack, if they're a support team and they use Slack as a work channel, that ServiceNow can talk to them via Slack or Teams. And then again, it's an alternative for approvals. So anytime you need to get a notification, I take action. rather than jumping into a portal or jumping into the full interface to take action, like do an approval, I can actually do it in line right in my Slack or Teams experience. We also improved the preferences feature. So if you're familiar with it in, I think it's, when did notification preferences come? Jakarta? Jakarta. Much better notification preferences system. So Slack and Teams will show up there, but you also have some filter options, so you can actually refine those preferences options along the way. I think we'll see some of that today as well. So we'll showcase that. And then ultimately, you can integrate ad hoc notifications. So we're going to showcase that today. The example that's not out of the box, but out of the possible is a P1 incident comes in, and I want to actually open up a new Slack channel and automatically add everybody from the watch list to the channel so that they can start engaging. And then we can actually share a conversation and track it in the activity feed of the record itself. So now it's not lost or in search hell from Slack or Teams. You can actually get it in context and have it searchable or turned into a knowledge article at a later date. So I'm going to show 3 more slides. It's only going to be 20 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. The 3 slides are just simple platform notification setup. So most of you are already familiar, so I won't spend time here. First, you define the message, just like you always did. It's simple legacy Servicenow form. I define the message. I define the channel. So I pick which channel will receive it, and I just choose Slack or Teams or push or email accordingly. And then finally, I get my message. When the condition is met, the push message goes out to my preferred channel. So all controlled through preferences. That's the big feature we're launching here in London for platform notifications, so I hope you like it. I'll talk a little bit about future. Since I'm here, I am product management. I have been given a little bit of freedom to talk about what's coming next or what we're thinking about. So I'll offer, as we get through the demo, I'll share some of those ideas, but your feedback, your adoption, your interest is what's going to drive our priorities. So I'll share the ideas where we want to go next after the demo. All right. I'll turn it over to Russ. Thank you.
All right. So hello again. I'm Russell from the notifications team, and I'm a developer, and this is my very first time speaking. And as any developer, I'm just amazing at public speaking. So this is going to be a live demo, and I tried to showcase lots of different ways that you can customize your instance, and so hopefully we'll move through this without too much trouble. So the purpose of the custom app that I'm coming up with, I want to build on top of the Now Actions app that we're shipping in the London release, and as you mentioned, we want it so that when priority 1 critical incidents come in, I want to stop using the phone system as like a conference bridge, and I would instead like to create that channel over on Slack. And I'm going to come up with a criteria for inviting my users to that channel, and they should be invited, and any conversation that happens in that channel should be synchronized back and forth between the incident forms so that I don't lose anything in what I consider my system of record. So that's the purpose, and I'm going to show my, this is my Slack workspace. Something that I'm going to jump past here so that we're not spending time setting it up is at this point I've already installed the app. I do want to talk in particular about if you're developing your custom Slack app, when you do so, the interface for it is really intuitive. One of the things that trips me up is they provide 2 auth tokens, and one just says OAuth token and one says your bot user OAuth token. In the case of this integration, I want my bot user to be able to create channels. So you have to perform that action with not the bot user token, with the main token. And that actually happens in the context of whoever installed the app. So I'm bringing that up just because for this particular thing, I put a user on Slack named P1 Bridge, and I had that person be the owner of the P1 Bridge app. And so that way when those channels are created, it's nice and clean and doesn't show up as like Russell made the channel. So yeah, first things first. After I've installed this app in ServiceNow, one of the things that the Now Actions app does, and any custom app that you add to it as well, is the ability to link your Slack user account to your ServiceNow user account. So the first time that I talk to the bot user, no matter what I say to it, my user ID in Slack will be included in that message, and we're going to make a determination that we don't know who you are. You're going to be given a link to authenticate your app. This is going to pull up your user profile, and you're going to see that there's a UI message on the top letting you know that you've linked your account. And that's all we need to do in this tab. We're now linked, and so if we go back in here and say hi to the bot again, we're going to get a different experience. We're going to say, it's going to say, hi, I know who you are. You can see, identified you by your user ID, and Slack turned that into a shorthand. And in this case, instead of the link you saw last time, it's a link to manage your notification preferences that we mentioned. So hopefully everybody's familiar with this. Coming in this release is the ability to search. And what we did when you associated your Slack account was we added a messaging channel. You'd be familiar with these if you've ever added a secondary email device or like a push device. So we went ahead and added a Slack channel. It has the name of my Slack instance in it, and that way if I've associated myself to multiple Slack workspaces, I can tell them apart. So this is where we would go to either enable or disable your Slack notifications, or you can individually opt in and out of notifications like you can today. And you can also set a schedule that says, I only want to receive Slack notifications between business hours or whatever you want to do. So the next important piece of my integration, now that I know who these users are on Slack, was a priority 1 incident is what I care about creating bridges on. So I'm just going to make a new one that says, help, I'm in a demo. Sounds good. And the important criteria for me was that the priority is critical. So I'm going to do that. The criteria that I'm going to work with for my contrived example is anybody who's in the work notes list should automatically get added to my new crisis bridge. So I'm going to go submit this, and it'll take a couple seconds to make it. In the meantime, I can show you what is in charge of that workflow. So to start off this integration, I use Flow Designer. The reason that I use Flow Designer, there it is, got the noise of it. The reason I use Flow Designer is I really like how clean the ability to set the trigger is. When I'm developing this thing, as opposed to like writing a big piece of script, where when I make a mistake or something doesn't go right, usually you go put log messages in the script and you're doing all these GS logs and looking for them. In this case, I absolutely love how you can go in here into executions, and I can bring one of these up. And here's the one that ran, and for all these inputs and outputs, I can see exactly what the runtime value of these were. It's an amazing amount of logging, and I can tell immediately where I messed up and what I need to go fix. That's not supposed to be blank, right? So in this case, here's what my Flow Designer does. Whenever that new incident came in, I created a new action called Create Slack Channel, and all that does is call Slack's REST API. I found the documentation on their website. And now this piece is reusable. So if I want to go make flows that do other things and create Slack channels, I just can drag in my Create Slack Channel action. The next important piece is defining a new table that I'm just calling P1 tracking. So anytime I make one of these, I need to create an association between that incident and that channel ID that I got from Slack. And this is going to help me later when I tie all these things back in together. And next, I can actually put a loop in here, and I don't have to worry about doing off by 1 errors or anything like that. So it takes care of the I want to loop over the work notes list, and for each person, I want to add them to the channel. So in this case, same thing, it just calls the Slack REST API, and it's reusable now. All right, so over in Slack, we can see that a new channel popped up. It has the name of my, the number of my int. And if we take a look, we can see that I've already been invited to it, Jake's invited to it, it's created by P1 Bridge. Something else interesting happened here. I set it up so that when this new channel gets created, it automatically puts a message that has a little bit of a notice. I picked a few fields that I thought might be important to somebody who's receiving these new notifications. And I actually added some buttons here too. So the buttons are controlled by, the back end of the buttons is controlled by script. I can write a script that does anything I want. It's just, if button equals work in progress, do this. So anything that's available from a script environment is available here. We know who this person is that clicks the buttons because they've associated their account, and we impersonate them before we kick off that script. So that means I have the incident open on the other tab, and if I hit this work in progress and come over to here, then we'll see down in the activities that this incident got set to work in progress, right? And it happens as it says I did that change. Likewise, if we go in here and we can say assign to myself, the activities show that I get an assignment to myself. So the last part of my criteria for this was I want two-way communication. I want it preserved on my form. It's my system of record for me to have it in incident. So I might say, something in the Slack chat, and I want that to actually show up on the form. So in this case, I've subscribed to the event from Slack that says there's a new message, and just throw it in the work notes on the form. It works the other way around, so I can say hi via the incident form, and I can post a new one of those. And to make this work, I'm just using out-of-box notifications. So if you're used to setting up email or any other kind of notification, Jake showed that there's a couple new forms on there. You can just pick a Slack channel to deliver content to. And if we pop over back to Slack, it's going to take its time. Hey, there it is. And so in this case, I have it put the work notes right there, and then I include a couple fields that I just want to be included with it. So you can see that state came over to work in progress. Okay, so I'm going to jump into a little bit of how this was accomplished. First of all, let me show you my Slack app. So like I said, I installed this as a different user. This is P1 Bridges. If you go to your apps in the Slack API, this is P1 Bridges apps. The important part to make this stuff work, and this is the same for the Now Actions app, you need to tell Slack that you're opting into interactive components, and you're going to give it a URL for action. These are those button clicks, and this is where they post information whenever somebody clicks a button. And the other important part is the event subscriptions. So what we're going to do out of box is locally on the instance, we keep a list of all the channels so that when you're in that notification form, you can say, I want to deliver this to this channel. Those all get managed for you by the integration. So you just need to opt into these 5-channel underscore events, and then you'll have an up-to-date list. Like the moment you make that channel in Slack, it shows up over in Servicenow. The other important event is the bot event for Message IM. That allows us to receive the events when like somebody says hi to the bot, and then we reply with, hey, we don't know who you are, or here's your notification preferences. And then the custom one for my custom integration is message channels. That will send me a copy of every message sent to a public channel. All right, let's see. All right, so I showed the part where Flow Designer went out and created a Slack channel and invited people to it. So I'm going to introduce something that we did where out of box, the platform has an event registry, and you can assign scripted actions to those events that happen. And we did something that's exactly the same for messaging events. So out of box, we defined a few Slack and Teams events. We don't have the same release cadence as Slack, so feel free when you want to handle new events, you can throw them in here. And likewise, when we define an action, we're just pointing it at that event from the event registry. So I can say when a channel is created, I want this script to run. So I'm just doing the usual stuff. You can see what's available here. I have a pointer to the application, and I have the channel ID and the channel name from Slack. I'm trying to be a good developer here, do a little bit of defensive coding, right? So I'm coding up my assumptions and some branches. I'm warning and getting out early if they're not true. And then I'm actually creating what Jake referred to as an ad hoc notification. So I'm setting up when that new channel is made, I'm saying, okay, when there's a new condition of the work notes change and it's for the incident that I care about, then go ahead and message that channel with some messaging content that I predefined, and I just throw the sysID in here. So I'll introduce to what that looks like. The messaging content for those new work notes looks similar to the slide. The important thing to point out here is you have access to variable substitution that you're familiar with if you author notifications. And that even includes a mail script, even though the title looks a little bit out of place when we're not in the context of mail. The same mail script that you've written for mail works here. So I just wrote a mail script that pulls out the last work note on that incident. And the fields here, you can dot walk through it. You can add all the fields you want. You can control the order. You can't control that 2-column layout that you see. Slack decides the best way to lay out the fields based on the device it's being viewed on. So we don't pick whether we want 1 column, 2 column, 8 columns. But we just put them in the order that we want. So the next part of the integration was when the Slack messages come in, I want to attach those to the work notes. That's very similar. We have a thing in the event registry for a new message, and I can define a scripted action that takes place because of that. you can see I have access to the raw JSON here. And, all of the actions have access to the raw JSON. And I'm doing the same defensive coding, making sure that it's something that I care about, making sure it's not like a message from another bot that I could, infinitely loop with another bot with. And eventually down here, I have the user record, and so I can just impersonate that person. I can add to the work notes whatever I want and just update it. So those are just this one last piece of content. Okay, so this is the message that I triggered to go out. When that new event came in that said that there was a channel created, I went ahead and sent this content out to the channel. So you can see that there, once again, this is the type of buttons instead of just simple. It has fields. I can change the order. And in this case, there's a list of buttons. I can add buttons that say whatever I want. And down in the script, it's important that I just go in there and say, if the button's work in progress, just do that. And if it's assigned to myself, do that. And like I mentioned, we impersonate the user before we kick this off. So in the case of events, an event's not always going to be something that has a user attached to it. There might be events that come from Slack, so I can't always enforce that. But in the case of actions, that always has to come from an authenticated user. So we do impersonation in that case. And then the only other last piece of internals to show is this is available from your profile, starting after you link these accounts. You can go down to your profile. There's a little UI action that says, show me my linked accounts. And you can see here, you have Slack as a prefix, and that thing that starts with T is your Slack team ID, and the U is your user ID. So that's how we know who you are. You don't have to come back and ever tell us again. We'll trust that Slack is, that once you're linked, we'll trust that that Slack user ID that we're given is you. And that's it. I want to turn it over to questions.
I'll take one quick moment before questions too. And first I owe you a joke, and then I'll talk about futures. Then I hope it gets interactive because we made this a very quick session. So my joke, what did the grapes say when you stepped on them? Nothing, you just let out a little wine. That was safe, right? All right, so futures. In the next release, so this was London. London is not launched yet, but it's imminent. This is built in available. Again, what we showed also was some of the art of the possible. Russ set up integration hub things to create a channel on the fly and such. That's not an out-of-the-box thing, but it's potentially content we can share because he already built it. So futures, a couple things. One, email client. If especially as a service desk agent or a case agent, if I'm an HR or other, working with email client is quite painful. Not only because the interface is a little bit stale. I mean, it's email. There's not a lot to it, but we're gonna create some improvements around that to control things like attachments. Maybe I want to attach a record from the record instead of from my hard drive. Simple thing. These are something we get a lot of asks for, as well as controlling who shows up in the to line. I want it to just be pre-filled in, and I don't want to have the agent go, enter 400 other people. I just want to control, right, the things that show up in the options I have, or show and hide things in that email client accordingly. So this is something we're going to focus on. It's been a pain point for a lot of customers. We get a lot of incidents on email client, so we hope that's of interest to you. Another thing that we are looking to do is, you saw a little bit of Flow Designer. If you're familiar with email, you've probably used inbound email scripts. So how about inbound email flows? How about instead of a condition that drops into script, you have a condition that drops into a flow with some helpers to drag and drop some stuff in that Flow Designer. So inbound email triggers is something that we're going to focus on. And then what was showed today is Slack and Teams as a channel. Eventually, I'll use that word specifically, we're going to open that up to be a channel framework. So whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Jabber or pick your next channel, that you can hook into our already out-of-the-box features and then make that a selectable thing. So whether we add that channel or we open it up and make it customer or partner configurable to add new channels. So those are a couple of the big things that we're thinking about next. So hope you enjoyed what Russell showed. I hope you you agree with some of these we're thinking of next. But again, your feedback and usage will drive our priority. So please let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you're waiting for. Question over here. That's correct. So the question is, do you need orchestration for Integration Hub? And the answer to that is yes. So three-part answer. First, Flow Designer is free. It's a platform capability. Flow Designer is about process automation. If you're doing process automation in the Servicenow platform, working with records, doing things against Servicenow stuff, that's just a platform capability. Integration Hub is when you integrate with a third-party system, like Slack, or Microsoft, AD, or some other system that's not ServiceNow. That requires the Integration Hub license, or it's part of the orchestration license. Again, with Slack and Teams, if you have the base entitlement for orchestration, you get unlimited usage of the Slack and Teams capabilities.
So it's not a transaction?
For Slack and Teams, it's not a transaction. And I'll just admit, I don't own licensing and I don't own Integration Hub, but the transaction pricing is a little flawed because you have high-value transactions, you have low-value transactions. What's the balance? I would recommend, if you're interested in orchestration with ServiceNow and Integration Hub, have a conversation with your account team. We'll make it right. We'll make it a meaningful cost based on your use cases, and you shouldn't be paying more than you have to, or more than you should be paying. So just have that conversation. Don't let the fact that it's transactional licensing be a barrier, because we'll absolutely work with you to get the adoption. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
How about this one over here first?
Is there any way to delay the notes, like between, say, a P1 outage where you're in chat and you have like 25 people talking and you have to constantly refresh that ticket? Or can you say, okay, can I set a timer to say, okay, post those notes in the ticket every 3 to 4 minutes instead of like every 3 or 4 seconds?
Okay. So the question was, can you delay the posting of notes? If you have a very chatty conversation, you might want to delay the content getting sent, and I'll hand that one over.
There's places in the platform that's done internally for other things. Connect is probably our most famous one, where if you're having a conversation with somebody in Connect, you don't need to be told on your, some other device that you're receiving messages in Connect. You're like in the window getting them. So in that case, they queue up events that say this person needs to be notified that they have new messages waiting for them, but they don't send them right away. It's sitting in a queue, and they cancel them before they send them out. So in that case, they're using a condition just to say, if this record that keeps track of the last time somebody has had that window open is newer than these were queued up, then we just disregard them.
Question here? The question is, can you close the ticket in Slack? You can author any action you want off that button. So if you click the close button, you author the response to that close button to close the record. Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the events was, say, archiving a channel. So if you wanted to make it so that the policy was, when you go archive the channel, that incident's going to go into solution proposed or whatnot, you could certainly do that. It just drops into script at that point.
Question here?
Are there any other licensing needs for users to be able to utilize this?
Just the integration, orchestration license, correct. That is a good question. So the question is there any other licenses required for a user to interact with Slack? So if it's a ticket that they are interacting with, so if it's their ticket, their request, and they're getting and feeding back response via Slack to the message they submitted, there's no cost for that. However, if they're if they jumped on a P1 bridge and they were writing comments that went into ServiceNow, we would either, you have some flexibility here, but we would ignore, if it's not a valid user, we would ignore them, those comments, or you could author additional logic to say create them a user account, but then they would require that ITIL user.
I'm just thinking from a perspective of a fulfiller. My company uses Slack very much, and you can all of a sudden respond to tickets through Slack as opposed to going into ServiceNow. I'm just curious on the requirements for the fulfiller.
If you're interacting with a ticket that you didn't submit, like a end user service portal, it requires a license, regardless of how you're doing it, through API, through the Slack integration or other. Question in the back?
I know I have a comment. Another use case that another possible use case is that we have our support tiers use Microsoft public speaking, unlike him. Our support desk, our support tiers have these teams communicate, right?
Yep.
And so I built this integration between Teams and ServiceNow where they can ask my bot who owns what business service, what, if it's, they can get the status of it, who manages it, that kind of stuff, the description. As an aside from just interacting with
So the use case that, for those that, you were pretty loud, but for the use case you commented on was he created a bot user to interact with ServiceNow so that the users inside of Slack can talk to the bot and then the bot handles some of the conversation. Yep.
Yeah, so it's worth mentioning all of this. It's kind of briefly shown here that we have an event registry for Teams, but it's worth mentioning that messaging content that you saw that turned into a Slack message, that works for Teams as well. So if that application record is Teams, we convert it into the correct output for Teams, and it looks similar, not identical. And then the same thing happens, we sync all the channels from Teams, but in Teams the data model's one level deeper. So you have a tenant and Teams and then channels within the Teams. So we represent that data model in here, and it syncs automatically the same way that Slack does. There's what's the other one? Oh, the user binding works exactly the same, but instead of like Slack and Team ID, it would just say Teams, and then I don't remember what the identifier is. I think it's a GUID after that, and then their user ID. Yeah, the actions work against Teams. You just have to pick a Teams event when you want to hook it up to a team.
Question here?
Yeah, how do you manage mandatory fields from Slack? So let's say you're closing an instance, your resolution summary is mandatory. Please change the question. Close buttons. But how would you manage something mandatory?
So the question is, how do you, if you were to take on a response action to say close an incident, how would you deal with mandatory fields? So I'll let you jump into, Russ, but you could author that. You could take a couple avenues. Either do it, because if you drop in a script, you can close records that have mandatory fields, unless you have a data policy defined. It just closes them with empty fields. But you might want to say, if missing data input, send a message back to them and maybe have a, I forget the command, but like a slash, close notes or something, where we then pick that up and drop it into the close notes as part of the Slack message. So you might make that more of a two-way conversation to say if they type something wrong and we're missing data, we send a message back to the Slack channel to say you need more information before we process the close.
How about drop down?
What was that?
How about something like a drop down? Like drop down.
The question is, how about a drop down? So Slack has, I think, quite a few ability to do quite a few interactive screens. Our out-of-the-box push notification is very generic. It's a list of fields in a field format. It's the simple text message or the buttons. Could you leverage that stuff? Absolutely. You could use Integration Hub and author the proper REST message with the proper payload to present drop-downs. It would be a custom, thing. I think that would be a good example where, based on adoption, based on your feedback, we'll build that stuff in eventually, based on your priority and your feedback and your usage and adoption. But that's a great example. Like I might want to drag and drop, maybe I'm in an incident and I want to drag and drop my knowledge article and have that displayed in a nice way to the Slack users that are interacting in that channel. Maybe I want to post a video. Maybe I want to do a drop down. There's a lot of options that Slack offers. They're just not pre-built in the UI. So taking advantage of them, I don't think would be too hard, but it's not there yet in the out-of-the-box content. Anything else?
Pretty much. It'd be great to be able to have like a choice list in your dictionary and then just be able to put that over in Slack and let somebody
pick it,
interact with it right there and just save it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool.
Is there a place where we can get a copy of the work you've done?
Did we publish that?
We can publish it to share. So I think part of the session, the session presentation, which we have a few more slides, not a ton, but a few more slides that show some of this, will be available from the conference. I think from there, we can post on the community and or share. So we can get it out there after this.
All the presentation is going to be on committee by Thursday. I've been told.
Okay, cool. Question over here?
Can you set it up so the system will respond based on a specific keyword in the message?
Yeah, you're in script once you get that message, and you could do that. And then the other Slacky option would be /commands, which we didn't end up shipping in London. But if you're a keen developer, maybe you'll find a way to handle /commands. But we didn't ship any support for that.
Yep. I mean, I'll also make an honorable mention, the virtual agent. They also have integration with Slack and Teams, and they have more of the conversational elements baked in where you can actually build a conversation with some drag and drop features. So if you post a message and then you say, is it hardware or software? You said software, okay, now you can start having a conversation but based on that authored tree of answers. So check out Virtual Agent if you're interested in that part of it as well. Virtual Agent. Also launching in London. Question over here.
Just trying to clarify the orchestration kind of licensing question. Do you need orchestration to just send out those flat notifications to a Slack channel, or is it just that interactive part?
We do. So just because it is an integration out of platform, again, it's infinite usage, but you need that base license. So if you have the orchestration license, you need to be entitled to use this. If you don't have it, that's a base requirement to turn on the plugin. Question here?
In terms of archiving the public channels, how does that kind of work? So that you don't not exploded with a ton of channels for no reason as they're created, if you did the create process.
Yeah, that would generate a lot of channels. And in this case, I made them public. You could also make a private channel and enumerate the people to invite to it. Is another way that I've seen people do conference bridge kind of things in Slack. In this case, what happens when the channel, you can archive it in Slack and it kind of just disappears off the UI. It's not lost forever. And then in this case, our out-of-box integration would be setting active to false on these records. And that's all managed for you when they get archived.
Question?
Do you have any plans to do a similar channel for Cisco Spark?
For Cisco Spark? I don't have immediate plans for any additional channels, but I do intend to make the channel framework. So I think if there's strong interest, please submit a request via Hi or through your account team, and we will start counting them. It's not to say that we can't push for a partner to build that. So if you have strong interest and you scream loud enough, we'll get somebody to build it. The idea is that this is now a framework that can be leveraged for any channel. There's a lot of interest out there for Facebook as the next one as well. The question was Cisco Spark. Is there plans? And I don't have any immediate plans for really any other channels except for, again, eventually, Servicenow is a channel. Servicenow is, you can't configure a notification to say go to Servicenow. We should, right? Whether it's Connect or we have the idea of a notification center where I get a little ding, hey, you have mail. How about, hey, you have a notification. If I'm logged in and using Servicenow, I shouldn't have to also get an email. So if the configured channel could say, when something is assigned to me or I was added to a watch list or what have you, and I'm in the interface, don't send me an email. Just tell me about it and then have a ability to interact with that notification. So again, these are things that we're thinking about, and your priority and asks and demands will help us prioritize that. Great. No other questions? Thank you so much for joining and
One final
sitting
note.
through this.
So we want to get feedback from you guys, right? So please complete the survey in the knowledge chat, right, mobile app. Thanks, guys, for presenting. Thanks for joining us. So this concludes this session.
Great.